Welcome to this video on the second-order structural model, one of a series of videos on transactional analysis concepts. This video assumes a working knowledge of the first-order structural model. If you are not familiar with it, please take a look at our video on that subject. The second-order structural model provides details on the internal structure of our personality. It does so by analysing our thoughts and feelings, in contrast with the second-order functional model, which examines external behaviour. In describing the various subdivisions of our ego state, it also gives information on their origins. As with other versions of the ego state model, in the second-order structural model, the adult ego state, which in this model is known as A2 for short, is undivided. The parent ego state, P2, is divided into multiple parent figures, each with their own parent, adult and child. The child ego state, C2, is also divided into its own parent, adult and child. The parent ego state contains parental introjects, rules and commands that, as children, we accepted without question from parent figures and that we unconsciously go on to use in our own lives. In effect, they are swallowed whole by us, and when we recall any given rule or command to use ourselves, we replay, without thinking, the voice tone and body language the parent figure showed when we introjected it from them. Since we may have multiple parent figures, parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, teachers, other caregivers, or even characters from films or TV shows, there may be multiple parent figures within our parent ego state, each with its own parent, adult or child. These are known as the parent in the parent, P3, the adult in the parent, A3, and the child in the parent, C3, respectively. It should be noted that though in this diagram 3 parent figures are indicated, that is simply a convenient way of showing that there can be multiple parent figures that are influencing any given person. In practice, there may be any number of influential parent figures. The number present depends entirely on that person's history, and each person is different. No assumption should be made as to the number or type of parent figures a person has. The parent in the parent includes the content of the rules or commands we received from our parent figures. When we recall rules or commands, it is this content that we are most likely to be conscious of. For example, just before crossing a road, we might say to ourselves, "Remember to look both ways." Often, the parent figures from whom we receive these introjects receive them from their own parent figures. In this way, rules and commands can be passed from generation to generation, subtly altered each time by each new person's unique perception of the parent figure they are introjecting from. To illustrate this, we can use the example of Claire, a company manager, who received an introject from her father of, "It's good to do what you say you'll do." As a result of this, she always tries to keep her word and is careful what she agrees to, especially at work. The adult in the parent contains our perception of the reasons our parent figures gave us for the rules and commands we swallowed whole from them. These reasons are, in effect, statements about how they see the world, about the nature of reality, and as such may either be fact-based, for example, it gets darker earlier in the winter, or opinion-based, things aren't what they used to be. When we recall rules or commands, we are often not conscious of these reasons unless they are brought out in therapy. Because of the power of our parent figures and the inability of young children to logically question these rules and commands, children introjecting them will always take these reasons as statements of fact. Needless to say, problems can occur when as adults we live by rules and commands anchored in a childhood view of how the world is, which are no longer valid or useful. Continuing with the example of Claire, we can now provide the reason she took from her parent figure for the rule she introjected. "It's good to do what you say you'll do, because people will think you're grown up." As a result of this, Claire has thought it especially important to keep her word when dealing with people she subconsciously sees as grown-ups, namely those in authority over her, such as superiors at the company she works for. If the adult in the parent provides the overt, if sometimes difficult to recall, reasons we took from parent figures when we introjected rules or commands from them, the child in the parent contains any covert or hidden information we took at the same time. Not only are we usually unaware of these secret messages when we recall rules or commands, often the parent figures themselves do not know they are sending them. These secret messages are coming from their own child ego state, which they may be only dimly aware of. Given the fact that these messages are coming from each parent figure's child ego state, they can often contain injunctions, powerful negative messages we can pick up from parent figures when we are very young. These messages, starting with the word don't, carry a clear instruction to stop acting in or being a certain way, or even to stop being at all. They can have a devastating effect. More on them, and their place in our own child ego state, in another video. Continuing with Claire, we can now add her parent figure's unintentional hidden message to the introject she swallowed whole. It's good to do what you say you'll do, because people will think you're grown up, so don't be a child. Because of this covert message, in addition to feeling she must always keep her word, especially to those in authority, Claire has from an early age found it difficult to enjoy herself and engage in carefree free child behaviour. As an adult, she feels strong feelings of discomfort when she is given the opportunity to relax. Though this is not something she has consciously decided, these feelings have a powerful effect on her daily life. As has been stated, in the second-order structural model, the adult ego state, A2, is not subdivided. It contains the strategies and techniques used for rationally solving problems and making judgments in the here and now. This can include appropriate feelings. For example, feeling scared in response to imminent danger is an entirely appropriate here and now response, as the fear may provide the impetus needed to escape. Wishing to escape danger is a valid adult response in the here and now. The parent figure commands from our parent ego state are judged here and stored for further use if still deemed relevant and useful. Our perception of what is useful, however, may be distorted by our parent and child ego states. This explains how our adult ego state can contain strategies and techniques which may cause us harm. To illustrate this, we can return to the example of Claire. Having promised to compile a report for her superiors, she is under pressure because some of her own staff have been very late in getting vital information to her. Completing the report in time will now require her to sacrifice a long weekend away with friends she had planned. In judging what to do, she recalls her father's rule of, "It's good to do what you say you'll do," and subconsciously recalls the additional parts that state, "Because people will think you're grown up, so don't be a child." In her adult ego state, influenced by both the conscious and unconscious aspects of the recalled introject, she considers her past experience of what happens when people do or don't follow the rule and concludes, people who do what they say are liked by people in authority. People who don't aren't liked. Given this, she judges the rule to be valid and continues to follow it by trying to keep her word. As a result, she decides to sacrifice her weekend to try to complete the report. She believes it will make her superiors like her and therefore help her advance in her career. In any case, she wasn't really looking forward to the weekend. Though she knows she's been working too hard, the thought of all that free time with nothing to do has made her very nervous. In the second-order structural model, the child ego state contains a multitude of stored experiences from childhood. To reflect the nature and origins of different experiences, it is subdivided into the parent in the child, P1, the adult in the child, A1, and the child in the child, C1. Since childhood experiences often involve responses to parent figure rules and commands, it is evident that as adults, our child ego state can influence how we respond to these introjects, with each subdivision playing a different role. The parent in the child contains our fantastical childlike perception of the rules and commands given to us by our parent figures. Because of how young we are when we receive these introjects, Our ability to reason is not fully developed, and further, the world outside the protection of our parent figures seems a strange and frightening place. As a consequence, when we receive introjects, they are wildly exaggerated in terms of both what they mean to us and the imagined consequences likely if we do not follow them. This happens even if parent figures are trying to be well-meaning and friendly. Relatively benign rules and commands can take on a darkly threatening aspect. We can even interpret some of them in a way that imperils our very existence if we do not follow them. It's from the magical thinking via which these introjects are transformed as they are stored in it that we get the alternative name for the parent in the child, the magical parent. The parent in the child is also the place where injunctions, the powerful negative messages mentioned previously, are stored, and is the source of the life script, the key determinant in how we live our lives in negative ways as adults. More details on the life script in another video. Returning to our example, when Claire recalls her father's rule of, "It's good to do what you say you'll do, because people will think you're grown up, so don't be a child," she also recalls the terrifying childhood mix of feeling and thought that formed in her parent in the child when she introjected it. "If I don't do what I say I'll do, the people that look after me won't like me. They'll abandon me, and I'll be all alone." Given the intense threatening power of this message, it is easy to see that though it was formed when Claire was a child, it can still affect her as an adult, despite her not being consciously aware of it. Due to the nature of its connection to the parent in the child, it is more appropriate at this point to examine the child in the child. We will come back to the adult in the child later. The child in the child contains the fundamental needs and drives of the child ego state. Since these needs and drives come from a deeper, emotional, sensory-focused part of us, rather than from the overly language-focused conscious mind, it is labelled the somatic child. Its responses usually primarily involve intense feelings. The child in the child has a role in forming our reaction to the rules and commands we receive from our parent figures. It provides our primary emotional response to the fantastical, scary interpretation of our introjects that we hold in the parent in the child. Given the dark, threatening nature of these interpretations, the response from the child in the child is usually intense sadness, fear, rage, or a mixture of them. To illustrate this, we can return to Claire's reaction to the rules she received from her father. Given the threatening intensity of her parent in the child interpretation of the introject, "If I don't do what I say I'll do, the people that look after me won't like me. They'll abandon me, and I'll be all alone." It is no surprise that her reaction to this from her child in the child is equally powerful. "I want to do what I'd like, but I don't want to be abandoned and left all alone. I'm really scared." She wants to be carefree, but is terrified of the consequences if she does not comply with the introject. The adult in the child is the problem-solving subdivision of the child ego state, though, since when we are children our minds have not yet fully developed, this problem-solving is based on intuition rather than logical reasoning. For this reason, when in this ego state, learning can be very quick. This, along with the natural curiosity that is a part of the adult in the child, has led to it being called the little professor. We often access it as adults when we are curious and keen to learn something new. In terms of reacting to the introjects of our parent figures, the adult in the child has a role in mediating between the other subdivisions of the child ego state. Our parent in the child causes us to imagine dangerous consequences for not following parent figure rules or commands, while our child in the child generates sadness, fear, or rage as a response, but also gives us a wish to behave freely without regard to our introjects. The adult in the child must, therefore, try to find a solution in which both the need to follow the rules and the need for freedom are addressed, with powerful negative emotions avoided. The solutions created by the adult in the child in response to these contradictions form the basis of the way we interact with our environment as adults. Since they result from an intuitive response to childhood problems rather than rational analysis, however, they can stop being useful or appropriate as our lives change. Though we grow and develop, our way of dealing with the world does not always do the same. We can encounter difficulties as we apply childhood solutions to the problems presented by an adult world. Returning to Claire, we can restate her parenting-the-child interpretation of the rule she received from her father. If I don't do what I say I'll do, the people that look after me won't love me. They'll abandon me, and I'll be alone. And her reaction from Child in the Child. I want to do what I'd like, but I don't want to be abandoned and left all alone. I'm really scared. From her Adult in the Child, she came up with a solution that worked for her as a child. I'll do what I've said I'll do so the people that look after me will love me and won't abandon me. Then, maybe after that, I can do what I'd like. The problem with this solution is that though it may have worked when she was a child, when her caregivers were known to her and were likely to stay with her, it may not work when she is an adult and her life is more complex. Faced with many remote authority figures who often change, she is unlikely to ever get to a stage where she feels she can relax and do what she'd like without entering therapy and using the second-order structural model to discover the source of her feelings. There will always be new authority figures she has not yet satisfied. All of Claire's responses to the introject from her father may be collected together to produce this sample script diagram. Such diagrams may be used when working with clients in the course of diagnosis and treatment. When analysing personality using the ego state model, however, assessing feelings and thoughts is only part of the story. The external part of our personality, what we do and what we say, is addressed by the second-order functional model. The second-order functional model and the first-order structural model are dealt with in other videos. Please visit our channel for more, and subscribe if you'd like to be notified when new videos are uploaded.